It's Whiplash 95.5 KLOS. My name is Full Metal Jackie, and I kind of can't believe that I'm saying this, but I am sitting here, not only sitting with Steve Vai, my favorite guitar player of all time, but sitting in Steve's home studio. Hello, Steve.
Hello. Hi. Nice to have you here at the Harmony Hut.
I'm so excited. I mean, if I went back in time to like the 14-year-old Full Metal Jackie and said, someday you're going to be out in Los Angeles and you will get to hang out with Steve Vai in his studio, I would have slapped myself in the face, be like, you are crazy. Thank you so much for having me here today.
I'm sure that when little Full Metal Jackie was to have an insight into all the people that you've met and all the people you supported on your show, she would have been in real shock.
Yeah, but for real, to be here at your studio is tremendous.
Well, it's nice
so
that
thank
you made
you.
the trip.
Thank you so much. There's so much going on with you as usual. So much to get to. Steve, obviously doing a million things, but let's talk about the Generation Axe tour. It's Steve Vai, Yngwie Malmsteen, Zakk Wylde, Nuno Bettencourt, and Tosin Abasi. A pretty awesome lineup.
Oh, it's a fantastic lineup. Yeah.
You guys seem to have fun on this tour.
You know, we really do. In the beginning, the idea kind of was one of those fantasy kind of thoughts that I had many years ago, where there was one backing band and just all these guitar players, crazy guitar players, you know, coming up and kind of genre specific, you know, and doing a seamless kind of a show where they each do some music by themselves and then interact with actual arranged music.
Right.
Because, you know, if you get a bunch of guys on the stage like that to just jam, it's going to be a mess. You know, it's like Yucca Flats. And so we organized a bunch of the classic rock tracks that we do. But it's a great show, you know. It's just a great celebration of the guitar. And once we got out there in the beginning, it was a lot of question marks. Like, how are you going to get all these guys on a bus, you know what I mean? And how are you going to pull this off? And even the guys were scratching their heads, you know, going, is this really going to work? And I said, yep. I know it's going to work. And it did. And we did an American tour.
Yep.
And we had a fantastic, of course there were, you know, bumps and stuff, but we really came together as a group of guys that have had amazing stories in our life, you know, and have gone through a lifetime basically of having a career in the music business and touring and records and all that. So this kind of like landed in our lap as sort of like a little vacation from all of that, because it's a cake gig, you know. And it went so well, we did an Asian tour, and I recorded the shows in Asia, and I've been editing feverishly, Greg and I, on creating a live Generation X record, and we have a pledge campaign for it and everything right now.
Very cool. And I mean, it's a very specialized type of fan, like the music fan that's into you know, all of you guys as musicians. So it's such a cool thing to have, you know, all of you playing together. And I've, you know, been to a couple of these in the past, and it's such a fun thing to see. And you know, people, it's an event that you don't get to see, like all of you guys on one stage ever.
Yeah, especially
so
playing
cool.
Intricate harmonies. You know, it's the kind of thing where it's a particular genre. You know, like this group of guys are like accomplished, over the top metal kind of players, but the show isn't designed just for, you know, guitar players. It's a celebration of the guitar in a particular genre. I mean, if this was a Generation X blues show, it would be very different,
right.
You know. But yeah, and if you're a guitar enthusiast, this is a peek into a very effective style of playing by five guys that actually bring it together to make the peak all that much more intense. And boy, oh boy, is it intense.
The Generation X tour, again, Steve Vai, Yngwie Malmsteen, Zakk Wylde, Tosin Abasi, and Nuno Bettencourt, City National Grove of Anaheim on November 8th. Throughout your career, you've incorporated different styles and techniques into your music. What piques your interest to explore like particular ways of playing?
Well, things that don't fall into any particular technique or category. You know, that's, if you listen, I mean, I've been involved with a lot of different kind of music, and I can sort of be a chameleon to a degree, but I'm not very authentic in stylized music. Like, I can play classical, but you don't want to hear, you know, I'm not great, and or country or jazz or even blues, you're not going to hear authentic music from me. Because when I was growing up, I love all that stuff, but I never felt good enough to be able to be authentic. But what was happening, which was interesting that I didn't realize, was as a result of that, I was developing a particular unique authenticity, which was just by accident, my own interest. I was just following my own interest without any kind of regard or expectation for the success of it, because that always has a tendency to hamper your ability to be really connected, completely connected with the creative process, because a lot of times if there's all these expectations, you may find yourself with an agenda that changes your instinctual kind of creativity. So as a result, there is some stylized flavors in my music, but I would never say, here's a great blues song that I did, or something like that.
So when you've done some of these records, over the years, I mean, I'm talking going back even to obviously Passion and Warfare and Flexible and everything. Did you go in with a plan, or did this stuff just happen?
Well, both, because stuff just happens in everybody's life all the time. Sometimes it's planned, sometimes it's not. And sometimes it's planned and it doesn't happen. So in the beginning when I was doing Flexible, there was just the desire, the fascination with recording. I love the idea of sound on sound, of building tracks, of being really funny, like capturing this. So it was very innocent when I was making Flexible. I had no expectations for the future success, or even like the feeling that this has to be great because my career depends on it. There was none of that. There was no expectation of a career. There was only, I really love music and I love doing this. Forget about the rest. And that's the most powerful formula that anybody can have in anything they endeavor to do.
I think not many people get that luxury of being able to just say, I'm going to do what I like. And I think that the most magic that has happens that way, not because a label says, we need you to go to the studio, we need you to make a record, and we need radio to be able to play it, so steer it this way, but don't do too much of this. I mean, that's not how magic happens.
Well, that's true, but you do have the luxury of doing whatever you want, and you do have the choice to do it under your own conditions and your own terms. That's a slippery slope, because I mean, I could say something like that and people would throw 1,000,001 excuses as to why they can't. But all of those excuses are actually the obstacles to the freedom of choice that you have to listen to a record company, not listen to a record company. You know what I mean?
Right.
To take a handle of your finances as a musician, to choose the musicians you want to play with, to decide what kind of music you want to record. These are all your absolute, unequivocal, no exception choices that you can make.
It seems like you've been very smart about how you've taken a handle of your career from the start. There's no like, oh, well, I had a manager and then I got my money stolen, and you've seemed to have been smart from the start and have been able to build an amazing career for yourself.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was an actual act of being smart. It was just 1 + 1 = 2. You know what I mean? And then having a connection to my instincts about something. Like, for instance, when I received a potential record deal for the first time with Flexible, and I read the deal, and I was just, you're kidding me. This is insane. I mean, how could this be? And I took it to an attorney, and he said, no, that's the way the record business is built. So I made the choice, because I wasn't in a state of panic. I didn't feel desperate.
Right.
I said, well, no, it's just not, So I don't know if that was smart or if it was just 1 + 1 does not equal -3. You know what I mean? Well, so I just navigated until I found something that felt good with my instincts, and what that was a distribution deal.
Right.
So that turned out to be unbelievably lucrative.
There was very nearly a reunion of the original David Lee Roth band a couple of years ago. What would you enjoy most about being able to play those songs with that band?
Wow, they're great songs. I mean, geez, I remember when we used to tour and we used to do, some of the stuff from Eat 'Em and Smile and Van Halen. I mean, what guitar player doesn't love playing Van Halen music? I mean, Panama, Pretty Woman. We did a lot of that Van Halen stuff, and it was just a hoot. I mean, it's so great. And the Eat 'Em and Smile stuff. It was just a great time, a great opportunity. The music was just, I mean, you remember the 80s. It was really fun. It was like really fun.
Did you think that when you were, doing, being an artist and doing music back then and looking ahead to now, did you think you would still be, making music and still being successful and where you are today?
Well, I never looked ahead and felt like I knew exactly what was going to happen, because you don't. But I was constantly driven by exciting ideas. Do you know what I mean? Like that's really where the passion comes from. When you get it, you know what it's like. I mean, look at all that you've achieved. You have your own radio show for a long time, very well respected. You service so many people who love this brand of music that you love. Do you know what I mean? So in essence, you're doing exactly the same thing. You're following your instincts, and the little girl who, was a rock fan just never lost the mojo. And it evolved into this. And it's the same with me.
You never lost the mojo.
I never lost my love for for music, and I never lost my enthusiasm over an exciting idea.
Right.
Because that's what turns you on. It's like the Jamathon I just did. I've had that idea sitting for 25 years. And it's just so interesting now that we did it, and it was such an incredible experience. I can't even tell you. It's like the idea was compelling enough so that you just do it. You just do it. The consequences are none of your business. If you're staying true to your passion, the consequences are inevitably very powerfully successful.
It's Full Metal Jackie. Steve Vai with us on the show tonight, and you touched on the big Mama Jamathon that just took place. 52 continuous hours of music and performances to raise money for foster care. What was the highlight for you?
Wow. Well, it ended up being 53 and a half hours. Okay. Because there was people that signed up, and I didn't want to let them down,
Right.
And it was funny because by the end of it, I felt like, my hands were like shredded, and it's kind of like the 13th round of a fight, and you're just throwing every punch. And it's like, But it was an extraordinary event, and there was really many surprising moments. The most surprising thing to me was how everything flowed so seamlessly, And we've raised so far over $100,000 for extraordinary families. So many people donated. I reached out to my network of friends, and anybody that couldn't make it wanted to make it, but they were on tour.
Right. And so you got a lot of people to donate some stuff, like guitars and everything.
Friends, companies that I work with, companies I don't work with. And if you go to jamathon.org, there's an auction page and a pledge campaign where you can see all of the really incredible things that have been donated. And it goes until Sunday. But the event itself, I'll tell you a little bit about Extraordinary Families. I always like to be on the board of at least one, or involved, hands-on with at least one charitable organization. It's nice to be able to write checks and stuff like that, but it's nice to kind of get involved, And I had transitioned from this one nonprofit that was actually merged with another company, and I found Extraordinary Families because a friend of mine had adopted from them. And I went and checked them out, and I was invited to join the board. And they're just amazing people. In LA alone, there's 20,000 kids that are in need of homes. And Extraordinary Families is one of the leading organizations for adoption and foster care and mentoring. Because a lot of times these kids in the foster care system, after they turn 18, they have to transition back into society because the foster care system can't support them.
Right.
But like Extraordinary Families supports them with mentoring, and they're an advocacy group too. So I just felt a real connection, and I thought then the Jamathon idea that was sitting in my mind for 25 years tapped me on the shoulder and said, "This is it. This is what you're going to do." And I said, "Okay, I surrender." And it was so much fun. So many people came together, and just the atmosphere there. And there was some really funny moments too.
Anything stand out for you?
Oh yeah. Well, let's see. Okay, one of them when Moby came up, he was so great. It's just a very interesting guy. And he wanted to do Purple Haze and a Whole Lot of Love. So I thought, all right. And we talked about because nothing was rehearsed. So we talked about the guitar solo in Whole Lot of Love because it's not really that easy. Jimmy Page riffs, they're pretty particular, his phrasing and everything. And he said, yeah, well, I just play whatever, and I'll take the first solo and the third solo. And I said, great, let's do it. And he's up there, and we're jamming, and we did Purple Haze, and it was fantastic. And then we're doing A Whole Lot of Love, and the weird breakdown. We had Derek Day singing, who's just amazing, And right at the time that the solo was about to come, the entire electricity for the stage right blew out, which included my amps, the bass amps, the keyboards, everything except Moby and the drums. And
Wow.
I'm just like, damn, And Moby is he's hammering away, man. He didn't lose character for a second. He held it, and it sounded so good. And he was so confident in what he was doing, while I'm walking around going die 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 die. And it was a great moment. I went back and looked at the video, and it was a great moment.
Did you guys film that
Well, it was.
It was live streamed.
It was live streamed, but I have the live stream.
Cool, because that would
Yeah.
be a great thing to release at some point. I'm sure that for people that didn't catch it when it.
Well, I'm planning
happened.
on airing the whole thing again at some point.
Great.
But we have the auction still going, and in the pledge campaign, we're offering 2 records that I'm going to pull from the Jamathon.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
I've got this 53 and a half hours to choose from. Sorry if you don't make it to the record, but So I'm going to be going through all that audio at some point and pulling enough to fulfill the requirements for pledge.
It's Full Metal Jackie. Steve Vai with me on the show tonight. The Generation Axe tour, of course, coming up. We've got City National Grove of Anaheim on November 8th. What do you anticipate most about being able to play and interact with Yngwie, Nuno, Tosin, and Zach on a daily basis?
Well, the interacting with those guys is on different levels. There's the personal interaction, which is always amusing. Well, not always, but most of the time completely amusing because they're all crazy, including myself. And when you get 5 guys like that on a bus, it's just the best time.
So you guys are all on one bus?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the best way to do it.
You need to put like one of those cameras just to stick it on the wall. Like that needs to happen.
Well, one of the things we declare, I know, right?
GoPro,
But
just
one of the things
stick a
we
couple around the
declared
bus.
is that the bus is sacred ground.
Oh, okay.
It's only where
No
us
GoPros.
guys hang, and we're up like 3-4 hours a night on the bus, laughing, telling stories, listening to music. So that's an interaction that's really nice. There's creative interactions, in the preparation of everything and the discussing of various things, and that's and there's personal interaction. Because that just happens when you're out at sea, There's no secrets.
Right.
So you get involved with people's, and vice versa, with their personal lives. And it's been very helpful because they're very insightful guys. Incredible senses of humor, amazing stories. But the other form of interaction that's quite enjoyable is just being on stage with them. And there's many kinds of levels of interacting there. Like if we're doing... if somebody's doing a solo and I'm playing a rhythm behind it, I'm supporting them. It's a way of interacting. If we're doing a melody line together, there's the specifics of listening to each other and blending with each other, and that's very a delicate space, because you really got to listen and make it sound like music together.
Right.
But the thing that I love the most is when you're interacting in a space of improv, in a space of no expectation, where you have to really listen and then respond or play together. And a great example of that is on the Generation X record. I just finished mixing Black Star, which is a track. It's an Yngwie track that him and I play together. It's one of the most beautiful guitar melodies ever written. You know, I mean, I would go as far as to say, for me personally, it's like the universe coming through a person in that melody. You know, it's like the voice of God in a sense. That's what I feel. It's so beautiful. And to have been able to play that with him, and the melody was only exceeded by our deep connection when you listen to it. The whole ending, how it moves and it evolves. And, you know, I follow him because that's the best way to jam with Yngwie. You know, you listen and then you respond, and then he listens. And there was such heights reached for me in some of the real delicate things that we did. I listen to it and I'm stunned. It's really quite powerful, at least for those who like that kind of thing.
Is there going to be a lot of different new collaborations happening on stage on this tour?
Well, not new as far as the people, but new, yes, in the way of songs.
Right.
Because we want to change out things.
Yeah.
I'll be doing a totally different set than my last American Gen X tour. And some things will stay the same. Like, well, Frankenstein, wait till you hear it. I mean, the way it came out is just so great. We just don't want to change it out.
There is an exhilaration that beginning musicians get with each new thing that they learn and master.
Yeah.
In what ways does a seasoned player like yourself still tap into that excitement?
The same way. The same way that an amateur or somebody just beginning does it. And because it always, at whatever level you're at, whether you're picking up the guitar for the first time and you can barely squeak out a note, or if you're, you know, an accomplished virtuoso, there's the thing that is always compelling is a good idea, an inspired idea, and the feeling of achievement. You know, that was always the impetus for me to continue when I was, and still is, because there's nothing more satisfying than conceiving of something in your head and imagining it, and then going to the guitar and not being able to play it, but then working through it, working on it, and then it starts to come together, and then all of a sudden there it is, and it's like, wow, it's really fulfilling. So that could be, for some people, learning how to tune. Right. Like they start, I can't understand this at all, you know, I can't, but I know it, and then all of a sudden you figure it out and you hear it and it comes together and you play a chord that's in tune and you're like, oh, I've arrived, I can tune. So, but obviously, tuning and creating something like Black Star, or, you know, there's a lot of distance between them, but the same thing went into the creation of Black Star. It was a piece of music that I was invited to play on, and we both saw the potential in it. So that, in and of itself, was enough of an exciting idea to then. So it's the same.
And you know, I mentioned 1,500 times how big of a fan I am of you, and I discovered who you were from your Zappa days.
Yeah.
So talk about, you know, what it was like as a young musician, you know, getting introduced into that world and learning from somebody like Frank Zappa.
Well, a day doesn't pass where I don't marvel that it all happened, because I was a huge fan. And then when I was 18, I actually spoke to him on the phone, and he hired me to do transcribing, which was amazing to be able to, where I was too young to join the band. He wanted me to try out for the band, but when I told him I was 18, he said, forget it. So when I was 20, I moved out to California the day after my 20th birthday and got an apartment right down the street from his house, which was a great advantage, because he was always I was going up there every day,
right,
virtually. And then when auditions came for the band for a tour, he invited me to the auditions, gave me a bunch of music to learn, didn't call on any of those songs during the audition, called on all other songs. And I thought I completely bombed the audition, you know. But it was funny because after the audition, I went up to him. I said, because he was hard on me. He was really hard. Even like some of the people that were there were coming to me and going, "Oh, he's putting the clamps on you." That's what we used to say. And so I figured I ain't got this gig. So I went to him after and I said, "I'm so sorry. I wasted your time coming down here." And and he said, "What are you talking about? You're in the band." And that was the first time I hugged him.
Wow.
But working for Frank was, as you can imagine, being that young, and I was completely innocent as far as the ways of touring and being a professional and dealing with the road and dealing with just I could deal with the music. I was very good at that, and that's what Frank needed. So that worked really well.
What are some of your favorite, moments that you can recall from your time with him?
Oh, there's so many. He was so funny. Frank, when you talk to Frank, he listened. Like, you felt as though he was completely dedicated to you, in a sense, in his listening. But also, he was very intuitive. So he could feel your intentions behind your words. So you'd be really careful what you say, because if he smelled, that you had an agenda or you were being egotistical in any way, you got it back in hard, with no excuses, no apologies, no nothing. But when you were sincere, he was great.
Was he, supportive? Did you tell him these are the things that I want to do, later on and on my own? I mean, was he supportive of you, anything that you wanted to do?
Well, Frank, he was very supportive in certain respects. He loaned me equipment to make flexible, and he'd never loaned gear.
Right.
But he used to he'd say, take this, use this, he showed me how to do things like edit. And I just learned, he didn't stop and show, he just, you bore witness to his working ethics and environment. And that in and of itself was powerfully educational, damn, imagine. But there was so many great instances where his sharp wit and sense of humor were constantly, he was constantly creative. He was connected to his creative impulse at all times. That's what genius is.
Do you still feel like, when you're creating stuff, even now, this many years later, do you still feel like there's stuff that you picked up from him during that time?
It's impossible to not, because anything you're exposed to in some way affects what you do. That's non-debatable, although it'll be debated. Because you may say, well, I don't like that, but you saw it,
right,
and you commented, and you had an emotional feeling about it, perhaps, and that plays into it. So, in my music, you can hear Hendrix, you can hear Zappa, it's all there. Satriani, he was a big part because he taught me how to play, and anything that that you're exposed to is somehow there. But at some point, it goes through the process of your own creative perspective, if you allow it. Otherwise, you're just pantomiming your heroes.
Right. No, I think you're right. I think you cannot help but use what you've been exposed to. That's what's in your...
It's there.
Yeah.
It'll always be there for the rest of your existence.
Right. It's Full Metal Jackie. Here with Steve Vai. We are preparing for the Generation Axe Tour. There are 2 Los Angeles area dates, one in November at the National Grove of Anaheim, City National Grove of Anaheim, and then a Wiltern show in December. And it's been a couple of years since Modern Primitive came out. What typically sparks your urge to make a new album?
There's no need to have a spark, because there's always the intention. A spark was sort of like an idea, for a record. And I've got way too many for this lifetime. So I just kind of catalog the ideas and then just move as things progress. But this funny thing about my career is I don't have like a ton of solo records out. Like, I don't have 50 solo records or even 30. I'm on hundreds of records, and with compilations and stuff like that, there's a lot. But there's a lot of other things I like to engage in, like these tours, like Generation X tour. The Jamathon was a tremendous amount of work. Composing for symphonies. I have a symphony show in Alabama at the end of this month, right before the Gen X tour. And that's always been a dream that's being fulfilled now. I get to play with orchestras all around the world. But it all takes away from getting into the studio and making a proper studio record. So
all these great opportunities keep coming up, and that you can't say no to.
Yeah, and it's funny because then I turn around and there's like 5 years in between studio records, and I'm like, wait a minute, stop. But I'll be going back to. I've been meaning to get back into the studio for a couple of years now, but there's just so many great other things, like the Passion and Warfare 25th anniversary tour. I just wanted to play that record from top to bottom, and I wanted to bring it to all the people that wanted to see it. So that was a very robust world tour, but it's a year and a half.
Right.
Don't blink,
Yeah, time flies. Do you think that you might get back into working on something next year?
The plan for me right now is the Generation X tour ends on the 18th, and then I'll take the rest of the year off. And then next year, I'm just going to be sitting in this room. I'll be going off the grid and working my butt off because I have, again, there's a really exciting idea. And when you get an idea, you visualize it, So I have virtually a complete visualization, not the exact music, for the next project. And that's how it just starts, and then the hard thing is waiting. You know what I mean? Because I want to do it like right now.
Will you think you'll still feel the same way about this idea when you finally get to it?
It's been about 5 years now that I've had it, so.
All right. Well, looking forward to what's to come, and check out these 2 Generation X tour dates. And Steve, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right.